Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. This is Samantha Varner at Pro Symmetry. I'm a customer success manager here, and today I'm joined by Sean, and we are going to be covering Tempus version 5.2. We are really excited to show this to you. We have so many good features and enhancements that we are delivering in 5.2. I will say, for the mess that 2020 has been, I think Tempus is just moving forward, and we're really delivering some quality items in here that I hope you all are excited about as well. We'll kind of give everyone just a few more seconds here to get logged on. Of course, if there's anyone from your organization who couldn't make it, please let me know. I would love to send a link to the recording once we have that. You as well will also receive a link to the recording about 24 hours from now. It'll come in an email, so please be on the lookout for that. All right, and it looks like we are good to go ahead and get started. So before we even get started with showing you all the amazing things that are happening with Tempus resource, I do want to mention if you would like to get upgraded, please contact me and I will start scheduling that. I would love to get you on 5.2 so that way you can enjoy everything that we are bringing. And of course, in case you are not aware, you do have to request that upgrade. So you will have to email me, let me know that you want to do it, and we will find a time to get that upgrade done. And it is at no cost to you at all. It is included with Tempus. So Sean, anything else you would like to add before we get started?
Nope.
All right, awesome. Let's get into it.
All right. Thanks, Samantha. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining. This is Sean. I'll be walking you through the 5.2 release today. I'll switch back and forth between slides, Excel, and obviously a live environment. There's also a new feature, a portfolio planning feature. It's a very sophisticated and capable feature set that is going to require some gymnastics inside of my screen because it enables a real-time connection to your what-if models. And as a result, I'll bring up two separate Chrome sessions, and you'll see the effects in real time as we do things like cloning projects, shifting projects, and so on in this analytic. So it'll be pretty cool. I'm going to do that close to the end. So hopefully that keeps everybody on the line as I talk to all the other stuff. You'll want to stick around to see more of the portfolio planner feature set. Okay. The slides will be available. Samantha will also follow up with links to the release notes as well. So keep an eye out for those things. I'll echo what Samantha mentioned earlier. 5.2 is our third quarterly release of calendar year 2020. Again, important, you have to schedule upgrades with us. These are free to you as subscribers to the Tempus software solution. And of course, you'll want to work with Samantha to get those scheduled. You can reach out to other members of the team that you've worked with, but those ultimately will get routed through to Samantha and her team. So fastest course would be to contact Samantha directly, but of course, feel free to reach out to anybody, including support line as well. Okay, so what I'd like to cover first are two new features, two pretty big ones. A lot of the other stuff, of course, it's new as well, but the other items are generally enhancements and expansions to existing feature sets. The two that I'll discuss here are brand new to the product. So the first is our global search. So very top of the screen, we've introduced a global search feature set, which allows you to search across the entirety of your Tempus deployment. Security is enforced. This will return projects, resources, attributes, as well as report information from anywhere across the system. So instead of having to browse first to the PM screen and then search for a project, or the same from the resource management screen, or even for a report, you can simply type this in the top header, and this global search function will return everything across the system. So let me jump over and show you this. So let's jump over to an instance of Tempus. This is still a testing environment, so we'll carry forward with that in mind. So very top of the screen, you'll notice this new search icon. And this is going to be important because the search features that you might have been used to working with that were in the same position have now moved. And you'll see that throughout the application. So like the search screen, PM screen, RM screen, elsewhere, search is now moved to be closer to the context or the object that it's filtering. So when you're working in those screens, it'll be closer to those grids, and you'll see more of that as we move throughout the demo. So from this top level search, from here, if I wanted to find, I know there's a project called Omega. I start typing and notice it returns Omega Phase 14, that specific project. I could click here and browse to it. If you wanted a wider search, maybe I want to look for a particular person, click on that again, and maybe we'll look for Amy. There's Amy Jacobs. Notice the little icons. And you can see here this legend, which is also a filter. So if we had projects with the same names or the same partial string is returned, you can further refine the result set by clicking these on or off. By default, they're all enabled. So again, going to help you very quickly get the objects inside of Tempus by simply clicking, typing, and when I click on this, this will take me into that specific project. There's Omega Phase 14. So really simple and easy to use, but again, an enterprise capable feature set that you'll find quite useful to you. Okay, the next new feature set is the Portfolio Planner. This is a very big, very elaborate addition to the product set. This is a very advanced analytical tool set that can work against your live Tempus data or against any of your what-if analyses. It'll give you the above-below line type of analysis you might be looking for based on capacities that you define inside of this analytic. A lot of highlighting, formatting, and calculations performed for you. There's a force in, force out capability. We can essentially normalize our selections using any attributes in the system, whether they're multi-criteria scoring attributes, financial attributes, or simply subjective drop-down list attributes. We can also move these items around inside their display to, again, build out a portfolio based on your preferences, based on your constraints, then, of course, under the overall constraints of your resource capacities. This is, again, a fairly elaborate feature set. We're going to cover this near the end live. We'll go through all the capabilities. And it's very closely modeled after a number of our premier clients and how they were doing some of these things before, in addition to Tempus, or again, moved off of third-party systems, usually homegrown or Excel-based, into Tempus. So we'll cover this in more detail. And I'm going to save that to the end, so hopefully keep everybody on the line. Okay, a few global design updates to be aware of. So you'll see some updates in the UI throughout the application. I'll call these out more specifically when we get to these individual screens. But two things I wanted to cover just really quickly. Number one, again, the search is now moving to be closer to the actual grid or data set that it is filtering. So no longer would you find your search at the top ribbon. Again, remember, that's been replaced with a global search, which is going to be available to you throughout the application. So it's going to follow you everywhere. And obviously, that's going to search enterprise-wide, whereas the individual project, resource, assignment type search bars or search windows have now moved to be closer to the grids in which they're searching. So you'll find this throughout the application. I'll show you this in a moment. And then another just quick item to be aware of, you'll notice a number of updates to the iconography. So little color enhancements, little icon updates, and just little things throughout the application, lots of cleanup items. Pretty minor, but again, just to be aware of, this should help folks better identify resource-centric attributes versus project-centric attributes, and so on. So let me quickly show you these. So let's jump back to search. And again, if we browse to project management, remember previously in 5.1 and earlier editions, your search was much higher up. Now, search has moved directly on top of the grid. So here it is in the project management screen. The same will be the case inside of the resource management screen. Again, here is our search window. All right, and then keep that in mind as you browse throughout the application, including inside of reports. But I'm going to hold off showing you that one because there's lots of really cool stuff, new stuff inside of reporting as well. All right, so those have moved. And then again, looking for fields. If I take you into, for example, let's say, bulk project allocation flat grid as an example, but you'll find this iconography kind of throughout the application. Let's do January, maybe till the end of October here. That's fine. And we'll go resource mode, select a few, there we go. So the iconography, inside of these drop-down lists, you'll find different icons for whether it's an assignment attribute, a resource attribute, as well as a project attribute. So more color coding, improvements in the display of those various icons. So a few minor things, but definitely some things to be aware of. All right, so moving on from some global design updates. Unlike past release notes, where I've normally sort of grouped these things in a kind of functions, I'm doing more of grouping into specific areas of the product in this particular case, given the types of updates that have been made. If there's any questions along the way or after the fact, please feel free to let me know, but it should help to keep things a bit more crisp as we walk through this discussion and keep us on track for complete amount of time. Okay, so inside of the project management screen, we've got a number of updates. The first is the Kanban. So you're aware that in 5.1, we did release a Kanban view, configurable inside the PM screen, but it was not editable. Starting in version 5.2, you can now double click on any card inside the Kanban view to bring it open for editing. And this assumes you have edit rights. If you have read-only rights, it would open read-only. But if we were to jump into that particular screen, so let's go to project management and let's jump to a Kanban view. There we go. Again, in the past, we could move these things around, we could change the layouts, that's great, but we couldn't double click or edit any of this information if we had rights to do so. Starting in 5.2, when I double click, this will launch the project information in this modal window. It's going to abide by the layout settings that you have configured under your attribute management window. And you can now either modify or view this information, again, depending upon your security. You'll also notice additional details here. We can actually open the full project using this little icon here. We can conduct cloning, snapshotting, shifting, deleting, and also locking, all from inside of this Kanban pop-up. Right, so that's going to be quite nice. This has been requested quite a bit by a number of clients. The next feature set inside the project management screen, and this is also one that's been requested pretty routinely from clients, is not just a grid style view, but also a Gantt style display. So starting in 5.2, you now have the option to view your project data through the grid view, through the Kanban view, and now also through a Gantt style view. This view does support different levels of zoom, search, column insertion, sorting, filtering, and so on. And if we browse back to project management screen, go back to the Gantt view option here, which is new. Okay, this is the new option we have. And we'll give this 1 second. There we go. All right, it's my first time opening this one up. Notice again, our bar layouts are here. We can search, we can zoom in or zoom out. We can also introduce filtering. And then of course, we can also insert any of our project-centric custom fields. All right, so these can all be inserted into the view as necessary. Let's maybe do project director. Okay, there we go. So we can work inside of this Gantt view like we do the other views, column expansion, column collapse. You'll find additional project-centric options here under this menu off to the far left, where we have open, clone, snapshot, shift, remove, which is delete, lock, and of course scroll to. So from a Gantt chart perspective, this is essentially that snap to option that'll snap to horizontally based on the where you've shifted horizontally inside of the Gantt view. All right, so again, now we have not just the Kanban and grid, but also a Gantt style view as well. All right, moving back to project management. Another addition we made was on cloning. So we've had cloning in the product for quite some time for both projects and for resources. One issue we had in project cloning was that when you cloned a project, if it wasn't a template that was empty and it was an actual project, which is what many of our clients want to do, the cloning would also clone the actual allocation or the actual demand. Now, clearly it's a new project. We want to remove any of those actuals from the cloned project. So starting in 5.2, the clone operation will now have two new options to clear actual allocation and clear actual demand. So let's jump back here and we'll go, in this case, let's use the grid view. And off on the far right, we click on our clone option. Notice two new options: clear actual allocation, clear actual demand. And unlike the other options, these two will always be set to yes by default. Now, some of you may want to keep the actuals. We see all sorts of stuff, and that's totally cool. But the majority are going to want to clear the actuals when copying a project. Now, we do have some customers that actually clone projects for other purposes, almost like their own little snapshot, even though that may not be necessary with the snapshotting function. Do keep in mind that if you did want to continue using it for that particular purpose, you do want to change these back to no. So that's probably one edge case where we would not want to clear actuals, but for pretty much every other case, again, these will be set to yes by default. Okay, so updates on cloning. We've also expanded the project audit log. So in past versions, we had the audit log at the project level. We introduced security to limit who could access those project and or resource-centric audit logs. And we had time-based filtering, but we didn't have additional filtering to potentially look at, let's say, just specific actions, just create actions, just update, just delete. Well, starting in 5.2, if we drill down into any particular project and we go to the audit log, you'll now notice that we have this filter option now made available. And when we select, we can now add additional filters inside of this particular project's audit log. So we can look by any additional modifications that have been made, changes to specific custom fields, changes to the financials, changes to attributes or allocations or demand data. All of that can now be filtered inside of any specific project's audit log. All right, and this was added to projects, but also to resources. So we'll cover that in a bit more detail when we get to the resource section. Okay, so project audit log update. So moving on now, two features that could maybe fit in a few other spots, but I want to put them separately into the system configuration category. The first is an ability now to configure from general settings which of the 3 PM views are available. Again, we have Kanban, Grid, and now Gantt. Some clients do not want the Kanban. Some clients do not want the Gantt. Others purely want to work in the Kanban, especially now that we can edit from it. So we've introduced a configuration setting here under general settings where you can now choose which of these views is or is not available. All right, I'll take you to this in just a second. The other item that, again, didn't fit so neatly anywhere else is a flag now for precision number custom attributes. We did not have a way to auto display as a percentage where we actually show the percentage symbol and icon. We have now added that. So for precision number fields, you'll notice there is now a percentage flag on or off. And now when we set these values, as you see in this example here where I have probability of win, the values now render as a percentage. So again, a simple update, but one that, again, we get quite often. So percentage now is available for precision numbers. So let's jump back to Tempus and we'll quickly walk through those two. So under admin settings, if we browse to our general settings, on the first tab, you're going to notice an option here to show or hide the various project management view options. And again, to do this, you would just, let's say, disable Kanban and then hit save. I'm not going to do that in my particular case, but that's how we can limit which of these views is available to end users. This is a global setting, something to keep in mind, and you'd set it and then save. And of course, this would apply across the system. Now for the precision number, to go back again to admin settings, attribute management, let's create a field. Let's call this maybe the probability of award, or really any other field. Maybe you have an external percentage complete value or some other percentage that you'd like to import or to render for use inside of reports, what if analysis, the portfolio planner, or simply for views inside the PM screen or RM screen, or even an assignment level attribute. What we'll do is select precision number as the data type and now set this to percentage. All right, so we call this prob of award. We'll go ahead and create that. And now back to the project management screen, I'll insert that column, prob of award. See, I've been using this one frequently. Okay. And now if I set the value, and remember it's precision number, so 0.45, enter, and there's our 45%. And of course, we can do our bulk selection as well. Let's set a whole bunch of these and maybe set these all at 75% or 85%. Oh, there's a mistake. That's a good one. good demo of what not to do, but we can fix very easily with bulk select. And of course, if I could not look down at my keyboard, 0.85. There we go. Okay. All right, so those are now set as percentage. So percentage for precision numbers now available. Okay. Resource management, not a ton here. So there's a lot of stuff for attributes and skills management, but really in terms of visibility, searching, sorting, filtering, and finding resources for that information. But in terms of specific changes to resources themselves, really the only big one we have in 5.2 is access to the resource audit log and expansion of filtering inside that audit log. So again, very quickly, and this is going to be very similar to what you saw inside the project management screen. If we drill down into any particular resource and we go to the audit log, again, this has been expanded, where in past editions we had start and end date range, but no filtering. So if we wanted to expand on information or expand on our filters for the resource audit log, this is now available inside of the resource entity. Okay, moving on. Build team. So some customers use build team heavily, others don't go near it. In any case, we're going to talk about it because there's been a number of updates to it. In fact, anywhere that you're going to be searching for a resource, whether it's in resource replace, resource request workflow, build team, and so on, we've made a number of changes. So we're going to cycle through all of those changes in a really, really positive way. So things like inserting various attributes to see and and sort by, inserting your skills matrix information, which you've been working through and has probably been one of our most widely adopted features, or adopted that so quickly compared to any other feature we've released. Those now have made their way through to those various different screens. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice for build team, and you'll see this in a number of other screens, is we've made a number of design updates. So we've made it much cleaner, much crisper. There's been some refactoring of design and layout to simplify your use of the application. So in the past, where you first have to do things like select what you'd want to add to the team or replace, and then hit another button, we've removed some of that to automate a number of those steps. So we've cleaned up this grid pretty considerably. Okay. We've also given you the ability to search for skills matrix data. Excuse me. So in the last edition, we launched the skills matrix functionality and pretty rapidly had customers asking, well, we need to be able to search for resources using those skills matrix data right away. So we had our skills matrix report, and we had, of course, had the skills matrix data, but we needed more techniques for finding those resources. Starting in 5.2, you'll find on a variety of screens options to search for resources based on specific skills matrix data. Take a look at this in a moment. You'll also find, and this gets really powerful, we've been demoing this in a few cases internally, really, really powerful. You can now, in all of these screens, and you'll see more of this throughout the demo today, you'll have the ability to insert not only your resource attributes, the actual fields themselves, read-only, but also your skills matrix information as well. So imagine building your team or doing a resource replace or resource request workflow. You'll have access not only to the heat map and remaining availability and resources and filtering and all the other stuff, but now you can insert the various columns and insert the skills matrix and search and filter by any of those criteria. So we've massively expanded on what's available inside of these screens. So let's take a look at build team, and we'll jump back to project management. And let's maybe start, how about Laguna phase 4, and we'll browse to the build team. Okay. Now again, you'll notice first off, the build team UI, much, much cleaner, looks great. Of course, we have our heat map, our various modes of display, units of measure, filters, various data sets, our clone from other project teams, the current team, and so on. Now, a few new updates. One, we can insert resource attributes. So as you're looking for resources to add to this particular project, excuse me, you can search for them and add them and insert directly into the grid. Excuse me one second. Okay, lots of talking. It may happen a few more times, apologies. So we can insert various fields. So there's employment basis and department. Notice those come right across. We can expand these columns. We can also sort by these values. So we can look for those by particular department, by employment basis, again, using existing resource attributes. We can also search by skills or insert skills. So perhaps we wanted to insert our technical skills, services skills, functional skills. Let's not kill the view entirely. There we go. So in this case, we've inserted functional skills. And now if I sort by name of my skills, I can look at the same time resource attributes, skills information, remaining availability with a heat map overlay, and of course, my security plays a role as well in the resources we see here. So massive improvement in capability inside of these resource replace, resource workflow, request workflow, as well as build team screens. Okay. You'll also find options here when filtering to also be able to filter by specific values. So in this case, if we filter by about skill 1 under functional skills, and we only want to return those resources that have skill value greater than 3, there we go. We can now very quickly return across our platform the resources that meet various skills requirements and have remaining availability and so on. So a pretty significant expansion in visibility, insight, and searching from inside of the build team screen. Okay, click back. Moving on, so that's build team. What I'd like to do next is move on to forecasting. Now, a number of those things we just walked through are also going to be available, again, in the updated resource replace feature, which is, I'm super excited for that one. I'll show you that in a moment, as well as the resource request workflow screen. But we're going to first touch on some of the updates to our traditional forecasting interfaces. Okay, this one, again, has come up for quite some time. This is the ability to use project security groups to limit access to planned allocation, planned demand, actual allocation, actual demand. So we can now limit who is able to view and or edit any of those specific data sets or individual data sets. So if you wanted to restrict users from being able to edit actuals, but be able to edit planned, that's now fully achievable using project security groups. All right, so we've expanded on the security here, something that, again, the community's asked for quite some time. Another ask, and this comes up more in demos, really, than it does for live deployments, but it still comes up from time to time, which is, in the past, we did not allow you to create null value assignments, meaning if I assign Sean to a project, if Sean has no allocation, there's nothing to keep, there's nothing to save. And that logic makes sense to a lot of us. Others go, no, we need the ability to sort of stage resources on a project because it's just going to save us some time. We want to insert resources, and then later we'll come back and fill out what that allocation or demand information will look like. Well, starting in version 5.2, you can now stage resources. You can now, from the single project allocation screen, excuse this, some of this updates here, I'll have to modify that, but it's only going to be SPA. You can make edits from BPA and BPA flat grid, but creating the assignments that are null will be done from SPA, single project allocation grid. So you'll notice the view down below for this new project A, and we'll walk through this live in a moment. I've added multiple resources with 0 allocation, 0 demand, planned or actual, and those are persistent. So again, now you can assign resources without actually assigning any allocation or demand data. Another update inside of the single project allocation grid is the ability to insert resource-centric attributes. Okay, so starting again in 5.2, you'll have the ability to insert resource attributes in SPA. Longer term, most likely next release, 5.3, you'll have the option as well to insert assignment attributes and make those edits. Very similar to what you can do inside of the BPA grid, BPA flat grid today. You'll also find throughout the app updates for formatting. So cross-project allocation will now align with your preferences, whether you want to show dashes or zeros for null values. So that's been updated in cross-project allocation. And again, cross-project allocation can be accessed from single project allocation as well as from the resource profile as well. So a minor update, but something that folks have asked about. Additionally, cross-project allocation will have hyperlinked projects. So going forward, if you drill into a resources cross-project allocation and then wanted to traverse to an associated project, you won't have to launch a separate window and go to Tempus and then find that project. Although now, frankly, with the enterprise search, it would actually be pretty easy. But again, with 5.2, you can now click on the hyperlink name inside of cross-project allocation to browse directly to that project. Right? And then two more updates, both available in both BPA and BPA flat grid, is an ability to create views. Again, another one that's come up for quite some time. It's a fairly complex add. It did make it in. This lets you save your timeframes, your modes, filters, selections, and other settings that are used inside of BPA and BPA flat grid. So again, if you're doing editing for different departments, portfolios, regions, product lines, whatever it may be, you can create those views and then very quickly cycle through those views, make the required updates, and exit, as opposed to having to rebuild your filters, your options, inserting different columns, and so on, as you're making those updates. So again, view creation inside of BPA and BPA flat grid. All right, so let's walk through these. So the first one is security for the various data sets. As you can imagine, this is under admin settings, role management, and this is going to be under project roles. And they're sort of dead here, dead center on the screen when you first log in. You'll see access actual allocation data set, access planned allocation data set, and then the same for the demand data sets. And again, for these, you'll see options for no option at all, view rights, or edit rights. All right, so now however you're crafting security, this now gives you the flexibility to expand and break down who can access and edit actuals, who can access and edit planned data, allocation and demand data across the system based on their project security group and then access policy association. Okay, next place we'll take you to, inside of TM Grid, let's create a new project. Okay, play nicely, Mr. Demo Machine. There we go. Okay, so let's do new project ABC123, and let's go to our allocations grid, set a time frame, October 1 till maybe sometime in early February, or how about the end of February. And what we'll do in this case is we'll just add some resources. So let's add Donna, and then how about Larry and George. And notice it's already showing me, of course, their cross-project details based on the heat map settings. But I'm not going to input anything. I'm not going to put an allocation. I don't know the values yet. I'm going to come back and do this later. In the past, when you'd hit create, this will all go away. Now, hit create. There we go. Notice it's checked in, and notice these are all null. All right, no shenanigans here. If we show plan and actuals, again, all zeros for both allocation, and of course, demand would be empty. Okay. But again, this saves our null assignments. So now, if I wanted to, I could check this out and now make the updates. So these are hours. So I want to put in, I don't know, 12 hours, and then of course we'll fill down and across. So we can create null assignments now, something new. Also, inside of the single project allocation grid, we can now access and insert resource-centric attributes. And notice again our little resource icon here. So we scroll down, see all the various resource attributes. We can insert these, see resource titles and roles, and then how about maybe a department. So no limits here. Can expand these various columns as necessary, and of course use this for visibility. These fields are read-only inside of the screen. Over time, we'll introduce additional editing rights, particularly for assignment level attribution. All right, then we can, of course, save and check in. Okay, let me just go back and refresh my mind here. So we talked about security, zero value assignments, inserting those attributes, cross-project allocation, and views. Perfect. Okay, so Cross-project allocation, if I click from here or from within the resource, we go to cross-project allocation. Notice this shows me the details. My configuration here would change based on zeros, if I want zeros or dashes, so that's a configuration setting. But you'll also notice here, these are hyperlinked. So if these projects are still in the system, carousel phase 17, we'll go ahead and click on this. And notice this would take me to that project. So those are now hyperlinked. The last two things I'll show you from within this section are within bulk project allocation and bulk project allocation flat grid. So let's start in BPA, legacy BPA. So in this particular view, and this is my first time browsing to it in this instance, so it's going to take a second. Always the risk, there we go. Okay, top right corner, my views. So now this is new. We can create new views. We can lock our views, make them default, edit the name, clone the views, and of course, delete the views. And these are going to function just like our other view functionality across the system. Create the view, browse to it, modify, and whatever you've done during that session, essentially is how that view would persist. If you like what you've got, you would then just use that lock icon to prevent any mods that you'd make, meaning like layout mods or filtering mods, to actually be persistent. So same functionality we'd have in the PM grid view, RM grid view, elsewhere, now available inside of BPA, and then also available inside of BPA flat grid. All right, again, there are my views up top, and right now I just have default, but I could certainly add more, and we've also added a search function here in the event that you're going to be creating a large number of views. So BPA and BPA flat grid now both. Okay, good stuff. Moving on. Okay. All right, so resource replace. This is a feature that not, in my opinion, not enough clients are aware of, or they're not using it as heavily perhaps. It's growing, and I think one of the reasons is it's kind of hidden. So inside, and you may not know this, you might be learning on this call, inside of single project allocation grid, when you hover over particular assignments, you get this little pop-up, and one of the options is resource replace. Very powerful feature set. And what it lets you do is take that specific assignment and then replace the resource with one or multiple resources. And then it updates directly inside the SPA grid. A few issues we had. One, customers didn't want to do a wholesale replacement. So let's say Sean is assigned for a 6-month window. I only want to replace Sean for one of the months, one of the weeks, a few of the days, or maybe, contour that work across multiple people, but I don't want to remove Sean entirely. Those weren't options. Instead, you'd have to make sort of a wholesale replacement. Well, starting again in version 5.2, we can now do all of those things. We can reallocate resources partially. We can contour the work across multiple resources without, again, having to do a wholesale replacement. We've also made a number of layout updates to the screen, as you can see here, including the ability to insert various columns and, of course, search by skill information, and also minimize the number of clicks required to conduct a replacement. Those of you that are working with or have become accustomed to using the resource request workflow functionality will find this to almost be identical. In fact, it's pretty much leveraging the same controls. The idea is you have a current allocation or demand profile. You want to conduct a replacement. You want to replace a limited time frame across multiple resources or contour across multiple resources. That is now all achievable inside of this resource replace screen. You'll also find options to search by skill matrix data, something I mentioned earlier when we were looking at things for in the build team screen. So we can now search by skills matrix data. We can also insert the skills matrix data directly into the net availability grid itself. And we can also insert resource attributes into this grid itself. So you'll find, again, that commonality in a number of these screens where the replace action actually occurs. And then the last feature set that was added to this resource replace function is, again, if you're a company using the build team feature, in the past, this resource replace would only allow you to look at resources that are part of your team. But again, starting in 5.2, you'll now find an option where you can actually peer outside of your current project team. And if you do find resources that are available that have the right skills and capabilities and departments and roles and all these things, when you add them to your project by doing a replacement using this method, they'll automatically get added to your project team. Okay, so let me show you an example of this. And for some, it might be a learning experience. Others might be well aware of this feature set. But let's pick on, how about, again, Laguna Phase 4, and we'll go to the allocation grid, and we're gonna check this out. So I'm in the resource tab, and I hover over a particular resource, and I select that little pencil icon, and you'll notice there's a resource replace option. This has always been here. This is not, I shouldn't say always, it's been here for a few years, or at least a year and a half maybe. When I click on this, again, it used to take me to a screen. Oh, doesn't want to play nicely with me. Okay. So, all right, well, it's not playing nicely. So I might have to go back to screen captures. Again, I am in a dev instance. This is always a risk. Let's see. Nope, not going to play nicely. Okay. Let me revert. And let's just do a control. Just reload this grid. Okay, appears to be playing nicely now. Okay, again, we're still in a test environment. So notice top grid shows me the resource, of course, the current allocation profile, the total amount, right? And then the lower grid shows me the resources that are either part of my team or available to me based on security across the entire pool. Of course, it has a heat map, so you'll notice the layout itself has been improved. You'll also notice now the ability to insert those various attributes, so department, employment basis, and so on. We can sort by these values as necessary. We can also insert the skill matrix information. So let's look for skill. How about that functional skill again? We can sort there. All right, so again, lots of information when conducting a resource replacement. You'll also have options here to filter by your skill values. So perhaps you want to filter for functional skill 1. And again, we want resources that are above a 3. So we'll use that same scenario. And perhaps we want to add, let's add these 2 people. So I click on these 2, it adds them to the assignment. And now I can contour this assignment. And I don't have to do, again, a full replacement. I might set this to 0, and we'll set this to 60 and 45. Notice it does have to match what's currently allocated, just like the resource request workflow functionality does. So I'm not doing a full replacement of Bruce. I'm just literally replacing Bruce only for the month of March, or only for a specific quarter or week or specific day. And I don't have to do this for one resource or multiple. I can spread this across one or many. The point being, again, I can get very granular with the replacement functionality. And once I like what I see here, I can hit replace, and that'll then make the updates, just confirming, inside the underlying project. And of course, this all gets set in the audit log. There's Lucas Gutierrez and Kimberly Shaw, and we can see the numbers here based on the adjustments we had made. All right, and there's Bruce going down to 0. So that's the resource replace function, again, available here with a number of updates for searching by skills, and then, of course, inserting those various other attributes. All right, save and check in. So those are updates on the resource replace functionality. The next set of updates are on the resource request workflow. A number of these are going to seem slightly repetitive, but we wanted to make these updates in all of these screens. But resource request workflow has some additional updates as well. The first one that, again, has been requested for quite some time is inside the resource request review screen, so the grid that shows you all of these requests. In the past, you could only insert fields that were of the resource request workflow data type. So there's actually a data set that runs that whole process. But when making decisions, you may want to understand, well, what's the priority of the project, or what department is this person from? So we've added an ability now inside of this interface to insert project and or resource custom attributes. And you can now use those for grouping, for sorting, for filtering, and so on. All right, so we've incorporated project and resource custom fields into the resource request review grid. Okay. Also, when you drill into a resource request, again, the UI has been updated, very similar to what you saw previously inside of Resource Replace and also Build Team. So there's some common UI updates, searching, as well as, again, the ability to search for specific attributes, including searching for skills matrix data. So again, skills matrix stuff fully integrated throughout all the interfaces for building the team, Resource Replace, and Resource Request workflow. We've also added, like you saw elsewhere, the ability to insert your skills matrix data into this grid, as well as insert your resource attributes as well. So again, all the same information we've seen elsewhere now flows through into the resource request feature set. So for this, I'll jump back to Tempus. I'm going to log out and log in with a different account. Sean. There you go. Okay, so I'm logged into Sean. Sean has some pending resource requests. So we'll launch this. I'm going to collapse this so we can focus on just the pending requests. And you'll notice in this case, I've got a number of resource request workflow fields, but I also have this, and you're going to see this value is elsewhere, this risk adjusted return on capital amount. So this tells me that sort of the ROI for that particular project. And the point being, I can now use this choose columns feature, and you'll notice the iconography as well, to insert project custom fields as well as resource custom fields. So right now I've inserted this project custom field, but perhaps I also want to see the role, and I also want to see the project health or the project director. Notice we can now insert all of these fields, green and red, dollar value, the role, modify these positions, and so on. So when I'm making decisions around which resource request workflow action to treat first, I may look first at, well, who's the manager? What's the department? What's the project priority? And things of that nature to make a more informed decision around which request to treat first or which order I should move in. Okay, so again, updates across the board inside of this resource request review grid. When we drill down into the requests themselves, a number of updates here, including a refactored layout. So like you've seen elsewhere, we have these various layouts. However these were entered, this must have been entered maybe by FTE, because 29,000 hours a month probably doesn't make sense, but it does give you an idea that, again, we have an updated grid here as well. Also, again, the ability to insert different columns, maybe the billing rate, employment basis, location, position role, and of course, our skill data. So maybe functional skills, there's our usual. Overlay our heat map or not, it's up to you. And then of course, filtering, we can now filter by our skills data as well. Okay, so again, I can filter for functional skills or any of the skills matrix data that I've built in my specific deployment. All right, so again, inserting columns, skills matrix data, searching for skills matrix data, and of course, this redesigned layout for better interaction. All right, so those are updates to the resource request workflow. I'm going to, before I forget, log out and then log back in as admin. Whoops, one of those days. There we go. Okay, so those are updates on the resource request workflow. On to reporting. So some changes now. There's really big stuff coming soon, but I think the things you'll see now are actually going to be quite impactful. People have been asking for them for, again, a long time. We're glad we finally got to them. And the first is reporting folders. So again, one that's been asked for quite some time. In addition to our report list, which remains in the system, so you'll still have the same access. Nothing has changed. You can continue to use the report list as you have in the past, the report access as you have in the past, but we now have added this report folder functionality, so you can create a centralized hierarchical set of folders to organize your reports. Really simple to do. It does require security rights, elevated rights to do this. You can create various folders. You then drag and drop to build a hierarchical structure. And then you drag and drop to organize the reports as you see fit. All right. So let me take you into Tempus to show you this. This is one that people really have been asking for quite some time. So inside of report management, notice I'm still in the report list view, but notice there is now a new option for report folder. When I click on this, it changes my view. And in this case, I'll expand reports. And you'll notice before what I'd done is I created an HR folder, finance folder, and then sub-finance folders for the US, the UK, France. Then we have product development, workforce management, IT. Again, you can create whatever you'd like. And moving these things around really simple, you'd simply drag and drop. Adding new folders, really simple as well. We click create folder. Let's say there's a new group. We'll just call it secret group. We'll hit save. That now gets added here. And perhaps the secret group is a member of maybe workforce management. So now under workforce management, I now have my secret group. And what we would do to organize our reports is simply drag them into those various folders. So folder structure now available. It is a globally defined folder structure. So you want to isolate who can actually create that. And then of course, reports get posted accordingly. Search is fully integrated as well. All right, so that's new to reporting. You'll also notice an entirely new menu. So when you are in the report folder view, this new view, you're going to see all of the existing report types, including the new one, Portfolio Planner, which we haven't even gotten to yet. Probably need to maybe get going a little more quickly. It's a pretty big release with lots of new stuff. So you'll notice this new menu structure. All right. And then one additional change you'll notice inside of reporting, and it has to do with the layout of financial data inside of pivot charts. So it's a pretty unique update, pretty straightforward, but I will show you very quickly. And let's do pivot chart. Hopefully I have some data in this instance. And what we had in the past is when we used our financial data, so maybe I'll use a financial category. I'll go to measures, and we'll go to financial data set. And we use our planned amount. In the past, these numbers weren't formatted. So we didn't have the currency symbol. We didn't have the appropriate formatting options for thousands, which again is another setting we have. So these have been updated. So it's a fairly small update, but one that has been asked for by those using financials. Have asked for this pretty routinely. So now some cleanup inside of reporting. Okay. So reporting, again, we added report folders, new reporting options, of course, which we'll get to, as well as the report menu, and then updates around currency labels and general formatting options and updates inside of pivot chart reports. Okay, a few updates on timesheets, not a ton, but two, again, that have come up quite a bit. The first is we've added an option under timesheet configuration to limit the projects that appear inside of timesheets. So if you had projects that maybe you wanted to prevent any time from being booked to for whatever reason, maybe it's a certain type of project that cannot be seen in a timesheet. Maybe you're dealing with that worker council stuff our friends in Europe have to frequently deal with, and there's certain projects that shouldn't show up. You can configure that here. Perhaps there's projects where you really want to avoid ever showing up at a timesheet because it could cause a problem downstream when booking to finance or something. Again, that can be controlled here using this new option to exclude certain projects from timesheets. And it's really hiding them from timesheets. So you can use this and use the system however you have in the past, but now this lets you intercept those projects that you don't want to show up in timesheets. Another update that we made, and I'm glad this was done in time, there's a few of our clients have been asking for it recently, is to restrict where time can be entered. So when we first launched timesheets, you could book time at the task level, assignment level, or at the project level. It was up to you. Then we created an option where time could only be, we could restrict, time could only be input at the project level, where we didn't want people to fuss with entering time at a very granular level. We wanted to enforce it so it only went to the project level. Well, now we have the opposite. We have customers that have said, we don't want time going to either, and we certainly don't want it booked at the project level. We have to have it at the more granular level for accounting reasons, for our preference, for whatever reason, doesn't matter. So starting in 5.2, we've introduced an option where now from timesheet configuration, you can force time to be input only at the task level, only at the project level, or both. All right, so you have complete flexibility on how you're inputting your time. All right, so these are both available under timesheet settings. So let's go into Tempus to admin settings. Both of these settings are available underneath timesheet configuration. Click here. And now in this view, there's just so much stuff here, so you bear with me for a moment. Here is hide projects from timesheet. This now lets us search for specific projects. You could do a select all. Don't do that unless you really want to. But again, you can search, or we can find specific projects, select those projects, and then save. And of course, those would not make their way onto timesheets. The other option up top is timesheet time entry. By default, it would be set to all. It is backward compatible, so if you do have it set to project level only, the project option would be selected by default. For those of you that wish to enforce entry only at the task level and prevent time entry at the project level, you can choose this task option. So this new option would enable that, and then of course you would use the save option here to implement that specific change. So a few updates on timesheets. Sheets. So those of you that are familiar with the Excel-like interfaces that we introduced in the product a few releases back, this is another one that's gained in popularity. A few updates we've made to these, just more usability stuff, and there'll be just a huge number of these and a huge number of scheduling related updates coming in 5.3. But for 5.2, a few of the more higher priority items that were introduced. We did introduce a full and expanded copy and paste capability. So copy and paste before left out certain formatting. We couldn't do entire rows with formatting. So starting in 5.2, we can copy and paste entire rows of data, entire columns, individual cells, and retain all formatting information, including any and all calculations. So pretty big updates on copy and paste. We've drastically improved the performance on row deletion. So much so that we've actually added an icon. So inside of Sheets, you can now essentially bulk select rows and then conduct delete very rapidly to clear data out of these sheets as needed using this new delete row icon. And then another one, and this is a big one for me, is just persisting column width. So as you're working in these sheets and you're adjusting column width, past additions would snap back to the original definition. Again, starting now in 5.2, the system will persist your column width on the save. So when you return, you won't have to fiddle with your column widths again. So let's jump into Tempus. We'll go through these pretty quickly. I always forget which one has my sample data in it. So I think it's maybe Omega. How about Omega? Let's take a look. And we'll browse to our sheets. There we go. Okay, so this one has, let me check this out. This is a sort of racy diagram with various generic faces and deliverables. Again, in the past, if I copy and paste, I would lose formatting. Now when I copy and paste, I retain all of my formatting. And then I believe we also grab entire rows here. Let's see, there we go. So we can grab entire rows and copy as well. So not only do we keep the formatting, values, and so on, but also calculations as well. Another one would be these column width. So as I make changes, these do get persisted. So on save, there we go. Notice it does persist. I come back and my column width is preserved. And then the last one is, of course, this delete. So in the past, some performance related challenges, some limitations. Now again, I can choose multiple rows and then use this delete command, this new icon, delete row, to eliminate any one of these. So let's maybe grab this one that we just inserted, hit delete, there we go. and then we can save and check in. All right, so a few updates on the Sheets feature set. Go back to Sheets. Scheduling, there's a number of things behind the scenes to enable some big updates that are coming in 5.3 around scheduling. This one I won't walk through. We can certainly schedule one-offs to go through this in more detail. Something that we had in the past was duplicate naming limitations. Starting in 5.2, we've removed that limitation. So now duplicate names are allowed. They just have to be isolated in specific WBS nodes. So you can see from the screen capture here, I've got 2 summary level tasks each with 1 subtask. The subtasks are the same name, which in the past would error, you would not be able to save this. Starting in 5.2, we can reuse these subtask values as long as they're isolated within specific WBS nodes. All right. So I won't walk through that one. It's pretty straightforward and a simple one. Again, we can have separate dialogue if you'd like. Excel import. One big change here in Excel import, we did expand it. We did add an Excel import function for admin time. So of course, for years, we've had import attributes, resources, projects, assignments, and then dozens of different options and settings. Starting in 5.2, we can now import. We have a new tab and we have a new template. We can import time-phased admin time information. Now, the admin time category must exist, so it won't create it for you. The data would be entered in your dominant unit. So whether that's hours or FTE will be based on your configuration, but you'd supply the resource name, the aggregation unit, which is going to be the same as others, day, week, or month, and then the admin time type, which again must exist. And those are those admin time categories that you create under your admin settings, and then the time-phased values. This uses essentially a merge operation. You won't have to specify. So if you're running this monthly, you won't have to keep building that Excel file. Instead, it's going to insert just the records that are changed or included in this particular file. So showing this to you quickly inside of the product. Let's go back to admin settings. And what we'll do is go to data synchronization and then up to Excel. Notice now a new tab, import admin time. Notice a new admin time template. And once you launch that template, and I'll launch this in Excel Online, you'll see a layout very much like this. The resource name would be listed here in column A. The aggregation unit, which is going to support the typical month, week, day. The name of the admin time type, and then the time-phased value. All right. Now, once you have this completed, like any other import process in Tempus, you would choose the file or you would drag and drop into this interface here and hit synchronize. And this would then insert that admin time information against the resources using the admin time type options that you've selected. All right, so we can now bulk import and insert admin time. All right, so those are updates on Excel import. I'm still getting to Portfolio Planner. That's coming next, but we're going to just wrap up API real quick. Okay, so some updates for the API, whether you're using our orchestrator product or you've built your own integration or work with a third-party systems integrator. 4 updates on the API side that are pretty impactful. Number 1, the lock and unlock functionality, which again, remember, entirely locks down a project from any edits or unlocks, is now available via the API. So if you have projects that go into any particular type of hold, whether it's legal or finance related or closeout related, you can now programmatically lock those projects or unlock them via the API. Also, similar to what you saw inside of the Excel import for admin time, you can now do the same programmatically via the API. So the admin time type must exist, so those categories. You would then essentially import the time-phased admin time data according to resource and admin time type, again, via the API. Now, the remaining 2, number 3 and 4, allow for updates to allocation or demand, as well as resource capacity. In the past, those of you that have done this programmatically knew that you had to pass the entire array. So if a task was from March to the end of the year, you had to do March to the end of the year, right, by day. We changed that recently where you'd only have to insert what you're changing. So you wouldn't have to insert every single day of the life of that assignment. You would maybe insert just for March, but it still had to be done by day. That array still had to be on a daily basis. Starting in 5.2, you'll now have essentially all of the same options you have from the UI to do this via the API. So you'll be able to write or update allocation, demand, planned or actual, by quarter, by month, or by week. The by day mode is still supported and will continue to be. This now simplifies writing those data back, and then Tempus would then interpret how do those data then get persisted back to the underlying project or resource. Capacity, same thing. You had to write the entirety, and then you had to do it by day. We then changed it to isolate time frame, but still to be by day. Starting at 5.2, we can choose the time unit that we use to write these data into Tempus. So those of you that have written applications that tie to Tempus and will update these data, this will significantly simplify that process. Okay, so moving on, the last thing I'd like to cover is this new feature, this portfolio planner. Again, this is based on how a number of our, frankly, some of our most sophisticated clients are doing their portfolio planning. They're essentially planning projects based under the constraints of their resource headcount. And they're doing it dynamically. They're doing it with stacked bar, stacked area style charts. So it's a mix of capacity planning with portfolio optimization. And you'll see as we get into this, there's going to be a range of features and functions that let us include additional attributes. So we can find the top number of projects that we might want to include in the portfolio by way of a project attribute, which would allow you to effectively pass things like multi-criteria scoring into this decision-making process or other values into the project selection process. All right. Now, there's a few key elements to this. You might ask, why would I want to use this feature set? And I've got a number of them listed here. So number one, we can evaluate existing or new portfolios under resource constraints. So you can think of this kind of like its own additional what-if analytic. We can prioritize projects using scoring, multi-criteria, other attributes that you might bring to bear into that conversation. You can identify what can fit and what cannot fit under your resource constraints given your preferences. So you'll see various calculations and highlighting to illuminate those projects that can essentially fit in that portfolio or not. We can use it as its own standalone decision support analytic, or use it in conjunction with Tempus what-if analysis, which I'm going to show in a bit. And it's really designed for complete and total flexibility and future enhancements. So in 5.3, you're going to see more on strategies, more on road mapping, more on machine learning and AI type evaluation related feature sets. So longer term, you're going to see more and more capabilities inside of the portfolio planner. So let me jump into portfolio planner. I'm going to close this window here. And portfolio planner is accessible under report writers. And what we'll do is maybe just walk through creating a brand new one. And that's here under portfolio planner. Okay. Now, when I click on it, it's going to take me to a setup screen. It's going to be very similar to what you've worked with in the past. So let's call this, portfolio A 2020 through 2021 or something like that. We'll choose a time frame. And in this case, I'm going to go back in time. I know it says 2020, but let me do 2019. And we'll go through, January 1, and then we'll go through the end of 2020, just based on my sample data. We can supply a description. We can choose whether the source data is live or our what-if analysis. Now, the what-if analysis part of this is really cool because unlike other reports, which you can tie to your what-if analysis, these are actually live connections. And in a moment, I'll take you through an example where we can actually bring up this portfolio planner feature side by side with a what-if analysis. And as I make changes in the what-if, this report is going to update in near real time. All right, we'll do that in a minute. So in this case, let's just use live data. We'll show grid lines. We'll draw it by month, and we'll draw hours. Okay. Next step is to insert our data series. Now, this is going to be similar to RAR2 but a bit step back so you won't have as many options. But let's do a new series. And again, I can choose from pretty much all the saved data sets you saw in RAR2. And we can choose planned, actual, remaining. We can aggregate by projects, or we can aggregate by an attribute. So if you wanted to make decisions, not by individual projects, but you wanted to do this by client, let's say, you can now stack by clients. And you'll see those clients here as you're making decisions on which of these to move forward with. But in this case, let's go back and remove our grouping. So we'll do this by project. Project ordering, we're going to touch on in a moment. That lets us choose how we actually stack these data. Because at some point, we're going to layer in a constraint, and we're going to try to see what fits under or can't fit under that particular constraint. Next, we can filter by projects or resources. In this case, we'll do projects, and I did ahead of time set up a field called portfolio. Did I not? Or maybe I could spell. Not portfolio, portfolio. And we'll say it contains only those that are part of portfolio A. So I'm doing portfolio A. There we go. So that's what's in portfolio A. I've got various layout options, areas, lines, and bar. And we'll go ahead and save that data series. Now, before I add in my constraints, notice a few things. These are semi-dockable type of controls. So I can collapse this side. I can change the sizing and spacing of the project menu or legend. I can also show this, this time slicer below, which lets me focus in on a specific area of the portfolio by time frame. So if I wanted to drill down in more detail for this time window, I can do so using this time filter. This is quite powerful feature set here. There we go. We'll expand this down a bit, give ourselves more real estate. You'll also notice our listing of projects. You can also access not only the chart, but also the tabular data behind the data set as well, all right? And none in this particular case. I'll show that a bit later. We can also choose for any of these. I haven't saved. That's one of the issues I have here. We can also choose which color coding are we applying to each project. This can be quite useful. It comes up all the time when we show RAR2, which is if you want to apply specific color codes. You could also use specific, very stark colors if you wish to identify projects as you move them around in the portfolio, particularly if you're doing something like a live coupled what-if analysis session that's tied to this particular report. Okay, next, let's go back to building out the report. We'll add one more series, and in this case, it's going to be capacity. We'll do as a line, and I'm going to filter, and I'll say this is for a particular department. Okay, so let's choose, let's not do that one. Department, there we go. Okay, and let's assume that just these departments are tied in with this group of projects. Let's trim this back a little bit. How about let's get rid of purchasing. There we go. So now we have a case where we have some projects that very clearly cannot happen. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. We'll save the report. Okay, so again, I've got my various sections. Notice immediately the system shows me my base capacity line and where that sits with regards to the projects that I've included. So these projects above can very, very clearly fit into this portfolio, and I can search as well. These currently do not. So these are going to be the ones that over time cannot be done given their current timing and my current constraint, which is my resource capacity line. Now, in the report, what makes this so unique, and you'll see the color coding here as well. This is going to reflect what can fit in versus what can't. Number one, I can change the ordering manually, so I could move something in by changing its order. So I could change Cinnamon Phase 20 to being my second ranked project, and you'll notice now that changed here, as well as the projects that can't be done any longer. Again, this is continually updating based on my preference and based on their demands for the resources that I've included in this analysis. You'll also notice it's showing the total allocation, but perhaps you want to make a decision based on some additional attribute or attributes. So what I did ahead of time is I created something, risk-adjusted return on invested capital. All right, so I'll insert that, and this might come from some external system. It might come from elsewhere, and let's just do this to me. Let's go ahead. Actually, if I scroll over, and this is my giant screen that does this. So a little bit. Yep. Okay. Anyways, so you can normally expand this over. It's not playing nicely with me at the moment. But notice I now have these, and the various risk-adjusted return on invested capital numbers. So currently I'm showing them listed just as I've inserted them, all right? And then I've modified one. But if you'd like, or I'd like, I can adjust this to say, well, give me the projects I can do if I start with, let's say, the smallest number forward, right? So now you can see all the projects I can do in this particular case based off of doing my RAROC information, or risk-adjusted return on invested capital, by smallest to lowest. Or if we adjust this and say, let's fit the largest returning projects in based on this dollar value, and you'll notice now the calculus has changed. So the number of projects we're able to include is smaller, but this ROIC value is higher. So this would dynamically let me choose the listing of projects that can make it in or can't make it in based on my preferences for prioritization, along with the constraint of my resource capacity line. Now you'll also find additional options here to force projects in or force them out. So you can, throughout the case, say, well, there might be certain projects that absolutely can't be done. This gives me an option now to force those out of the portfolio. Notice this moves it out of the selection process, removes it entirely from the analysis, so you won't see it off on the right-hand side, and it takes it out of the selection process. So it's hidden from the view, both inside this screen here, my listing of projects here, as well as my project screen here. So my ordering can also change. So I can normalize the selection based on my priority score or whatever value I'd like to use for prioritization using any of my project attributes. I can choose to force things in or force them out. All right, I can choose the number of records that get returned for explicit manipulation versus being sort of grouped together into a collection of projects. And then, of course, see all of this in real time inside of this analytic, right? So this is our portfolio planner feature set. Now, another capability that makes this much more powerful is that I can connect these portfolio planner analytics to a what-if analysis. And to show you an example of that, this is going to get a little tricky. Let's see if it works. When I say works, it's really more of my screens. So this is going to be a first to the world. So I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second. So I'm going to pause my screen sharing. Now I'm going to share my full gigantic monitor. So let's try that again. Okay, so bear with me. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing second screen. And what I'll do is hit go to Tempus. Okay, and now let's go to 2025 plan. So I'm gonna put two different screens here. So Samantha, if you're on the line, if you can just confirm that you're seeing both windows.
Yep, I can see both screens.
Cool. All right, we'll see if these gymnastics work out. So what I'm going to do now is go to, I have a cloned 2021 portfolio plan report, and we'll launch that. And what I did ahead of time is I coded certain projects very starkly. So I think I set them as white and black, so you can very clearly see the projects we're looking at. So in this analysis, I can't get my packaging revision phase 3 included because very clearly early on, I'm above this waterline here around my capacity headcount. But I want to see what's the effect of bringing this in to, or changing the timeline. So I still want to do it, but I can't do it over this time frame. So now inside the what if model that is tied to this, let me go to, what is it, packaging. There we go. And we're looking at this over 5 years. Let's do over 3 years. And then what I'll do is move this out. So right now it's showing January, but let's move it to start out in April. And there we go. There we go. So notice in real time, this project is now shifted over. So now based on changes I make in my what if analysis, these values now adjust in real time. This also gives me functionality where I can now maybe clone this project. So we'll clone this and let's add that guy in. There we go. So now there's a cloned project. So I've brought in this other project and this cloned one, maybe you want to move that one out a number of months. They can now see all of this information moving around based on changes I'm making in a linked what if analysis session. So a really powerful feature set that also lets me make decisions of building my portfolio from scratch, so sort of including and excluding various projects, and I can see that effect. So again, really, really cool and powerful capability here to tie together this portfolio planner functionality along with a what if analysis session to see in real time how we can construct a more optimal portfolio based on top-down multi-criteria scoring or more traditional portfolio ranking, project selection criteria, along with and under the constraints of resource capacity related challenges. We bring all of those things together in this new set of features called Portfolio Planner. Okay. I envision we'll be doing a number of additional breakout sessions for this, and we've got a few minutes left, so let me switch gears again. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing just one screen now. All right. So back to our deck. So I believe that is it. So we've got in the slide deck all of these different screens. I know there's stuff that I missed out on. There's a lot here. But ultimately what I'd recommend is, of course, reach out to us if you have questions. You will receive the release notes. They will be comprehensive. There's quite a bit there, as you can see. And then, of course, you'd want to work with Samantha and her team to get your environment scheduled for upgrade. And you want to reach out as soon as possible for that. Again, we could upgrade. If you have a dev environment, get that going. But with that said, I will stop talking. I hope this was useful to everybody. If there's any questions, we can follow up after. Samantha, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Excuse me, I think that throat tickle you sent my way. Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. Really excited for everything. I have had a few people reach out already regarding getting upgraded, so thank you so much. I will be in touch this afternoon, and then a few people also sent some questions in, and I will be responding to those via email as well this afternoon. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to reach out. Like Sean mentioned, the full release notes will be in your inbox soon, and we're really excited. So thank you everyone for attending today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.